the one on a clapboard, like a...
Hello, and welcome to the Ohio Northern Surf Environmental Humanities Lab podcast. We are a group of interdisciplinary undergraduate researchers who have developed their own independent study on the environment using humanities methods. We have been advised by Drs. Forrest Klingerman, Emily J., and Jonathan Spellman. My name is Maggie Kurtz, and I am an environmental and field biology major, and my project has focused on discovering if there is a theological deficit that matches the knowledge deficit surrounding climate change. So this project sort of stemmed from my own personal experience in life, growing up Catholic and also being a science major and just being very science focused. So with the science background, I learned a lot about how to educate people about climate change and like how that's portrayed in different areas of the media and in textbooks and just in general. So there is a knowledge deficit that stems from that, where people don't necessarily understand everything about the information that is out there. So I kind of wanted to see if different branches of Christianity, that being Catholics, Methodists, and Baptists, if there was a sort of denominational gap that stems from toward the a more congregational level in the local churches of Ada, to see if there is that theological gap. So first in my paper, I wanted to make sure I knew how I was defining climate change. So I took that from the United Nations, and it's a definition that I've seen a lot, which is long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. And I also wanted to address climate change as also a wicked problem and define that as such. So in 1973, urban planners Horace Riddle and Melvin Weber, they defined a wicked problem as something that avoids straightforward articulation and is impossible to solve in a way that is simple or final. And then in his book, The Violence of Climate Change, author Kevin J. O'Brien wrote about this idea of climate change being a wicked problem. And he gave 6 different perspectives from which someone could view climate change. That included climate change as a scientific, environmental, human, political, economic, and a religion problem. And then for the purpose of my project, I'm focusing on that science and religious perspective. So after making sure I knew those definitions for those terms, I moved on to the religious aspect. So I looked at the Catholic, Methodist, and Baptist official denominational statements and what they had to say about climate change. And then got in contact with our chaplain here at ONU, and then 3 clergy members in Ada, and created a series of questions for interviews, and I'm in the process of conducting those interviews. And then further going to use those as case studies comparing denominational statements to what clergy members in a small local town like Ada have to say.
So through this project, especially with how informed it was by the people you were talking to, how did you exactly define environment in terms of your writing?
So the main focus of mine is more on the climate change. So like I said, I defined that, but obviously the environmental aspect is in there. So in my interviews, I asked people's relationships, like their personal relationships with the environment, and kind of got their perspective on it. That I'll add into my paper. But personally, for me, when I think of the environment, it's kind of just like nature and everything around us and all the abiotic and biotic factors that are working together. But it's also that faith aspect of just being like creation and everything that stems from creation.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, what factors do you feel most affect people's perceptions and actions towards the environment?
So I think like information and authority, because that's 2 of the big focuses on mine. I'm looking at the information both scientifically and like faith-based, but also the authority that's giving that information out, like interviewing with the clergy. So I feel like not only does the information you're given and how you take that in affects just your view on environmental issues in general, but also the people who are giving you that information and the way they present it plays a big role in that.
So how much do you think that the information can change based on who's presenting it? Like, how much bias do you think controls what the information is?
I kind of looked at it as like, even if it's like a parent and a child, like the way like a parent can give a kid information about something, that'll change the way they view it based on like how a teacher might give that information. So looking at like the 2 interviews I've done so far are both with Methodists, and while their views are like aligned and everything, they still have like very different things to say, but they're kind of teaching the similar things just in different ways, if that makes sense. So I think it definitely does play a role. It's going to be interesting getting the other interviews done to see how different like branches of Christianity play roles in that same authority.
That's interesting. So what other further research have you identified other than like obviously the other interviews?
I have to do those other interviews, but after getting those, just like, flat have to do those interviews, but comparing them, like the denominations to each other and the denominations to the congregations, that's where the further research definitely is.
So you had mentioned that your own background is Catholic, and you were interviewing, certain different sects of Christianity. Did you kind of have any unexpected takeaways or end up learning anything new about your own faith?
That's interesting. I don't know necessarily about my own faith, but it was really cool to learn about other people's faith, and it didn't necessarily shape my faith in any way, but probably my overall look on like things, like learning about like the Methodist beliefs was really interesting because both David, our chaplain, and then Brandy, who's the reverend at the Methodist Church here in Ada, they talked about this very like climate change and like the environment is important, not just because it's for all these living things out there, but also because it affects us, like are the relationships with other people.
Right.
So I think that's a really cool way to look at it, and definitely something I took away. Thank you for listening, and please tune in next week for Aubrey's presentation on art and the environment. Go Bears!